Imagine using a software that can be able to really scrutinize your fiction manuscript and figure out where it needs improvement and where it actually is getting it right. And that actually is not out of the realm of possibilities. In fact, today's guest is the founder of that software and service called Fictionary. And now Fictionary is responsible for doing structural editing of fiction manuscripts. And the founder is Kristina Stanley. Now, we talked with each other a couple of years ago, but I figured it was high time we brought her here onto the podcast to talk a little bit more about Fictionary, why she put it together, what we have in store in the very near future for Fictionary. So without any further ado, let's get into the interview. Kristina, it has been a long time in the making. What the heck took us so long to do this interview here with you?
Well, I think it's that people are busy. Like, you're busy, I'm busy. It just kind of happened that way. I don't know.
This is how life works and such. I've already kind of laid the groundwork here prior to our interview here. So everybody kind of has a somewhat of a decent idea of what Fictionary is. But if you were to share what Fictionary is and how that works for authors, that would really, really help out.
I would love to. So Fictionary has changed since it began. We started as software for writers to help them perform a structural edit on fiction. And so we have software that's based on natural language processing, and you can import your manuscript and you can do your own structural edit. And that was our goal. We expanded to editors doing other people's manuscripts. And then last year we started a community. And it's a community based on kindness. It's full of writers and editors. We started it last summer, and we're just about to hit 1,700 members. So we're really happy about that. Nice. Yeah, super excited. And what we're doing in that community is we're teaching people. And so Fictionary has kind of become a community base of people who use software to edit their novels. And so it's a ton of live events. It's all about helping the writer. We have people from all over the world. It's super diverse. And so when people come in the community, they actually think that's Fictionary. But Fictionary is really storyteller, story coach software. And that supports the whole community around it. Because, of course, the community is free. So the software is enabling us to do it. And it's super fun and super exciting.
I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Fictionary and what people can kind of expect. But to be clear, Fictionary isn't like a grammar checking software, is it?
No. So we work really well with somebody like Pro Writing Aid, where they're all about copy editing. We're all about the story. So we're about answering the question, as a writer, do you have a story in your draft? And our software will answer that, because we'll look at the story arc and tell you, not only do you have an inciting incident, plot point 1, a middle plot point 2, and a climax, are they in the right place and are they doing the right things? And then behind that, is your word count set up properly so you have balance in your story and it's in the right place? And then behind that, we look at how many characters you have, how many scenes are they in, how many points of view do they have? And so you can start looking at the structure of your story. We don't focus on words at all. We focus on structure of a story, and we've taken hundreds of years of research on the story arc that's been around since the beginning of storytelling, and picked the 5 key points that fit in all the story structures and use those. So it works for all genres. And then you can be more specific in your genres, or if you want to follow the 7-point method or the beats in Save the Cat or any of those, you can build that around the basics of the 5 plot points.
Am I incorrect in saying, let me restate this, can I just skip my developmental editor if I start using something like Fictionary?
We have people do, and we have some very successful authors who've done that. So I'm going to say it depends on your skill. And so a newer writer probably doesn't want to do that. They want some insight from an editor. Now, having said that, we have Fictionary certified story coach editors who present and teach in our community, and people, they get their real work evaluated live by these editors in front of other people, so you can get feedback to kind of know where you are as a writer. It's wholly brave of writers. It's really a brave thing, but super exciting to watch. It's nerve-wracking on the editor because people are watching them edit live. So, it's a scary prospect for both sides, but it helps people know where they're at. And to answer that question, do you need a structural editor? One of our writers, so I'll just talk about her for a second, Lisa Stringfellow, who is agented by Writers House Literary Agency in New York. And there was a 5-house publishing auction for her book. And they asked her, how did you get your book so good? And she said, oh, I use this thing called Fictionary. I'm like, well, what is this thing? And that's how we got Writers House Literary Agency to sponsor our award, our Fictionary Book of the Year award, and offer a full read-through for the winners, just from Lisa, who wrote in Fictionary. So she's an exceptional writer. I mean, she just is. And so it just really depends where you are on the spectrum, I guess, is the way to sum that up.
Okay, so it's not necessarily something you would encourage newbies to do. Now, you discussed real briefly that you have human editors that will kind of do this live. Where can your community members see something like that? Is that over like on Facebook or on your YouTube channel or something like that?
We use Circle. So our fiction, it's fictionary.circle.so. Fictionary.circle.so is the community, and Circle it's great software. They just run, it's community based, like they run communities, and in there, once you come in and join, then we just have events. So they've got you can do what we're doing now. You can do it over Zoom, you do whatever. You just have these live events where people show up, and we keep it to around 100 people in an event, so you can still have conversation around it. And then away we go from there. It's really interesting.
Let's take a step back here just real briefly, because there might be some people that are new authors and they're saying, okay, Fictionary doesn't sound like I should be solely rely on this. Let's discuss developmental editing and structural editing. What does that mean, and how does that compare to something like, say, copy editing?
Sure. Yes, that's a great question. And when I first started, I'm like, what is substantive editing? What is developmental editing? I don't know. I think I gotta go Google this stuff, right? It's so confusing. So we call it story editing for fiction. Different for nonfiction, but for fiction, we use the term story editing because it's really focused on the story and the structure of the story. So it looks at character, it looks at plot, and it looks at setting. Copy editing comes later when you've already written your story. You've got a good solid draft, and then you copy edit, and it's looking at sentence level. And copy editing in itself is a huge range. So line editing, part of copy editing, but line editing is where the author needs a ton of work. So you got to move paragraphs, you're restructuring sentences. It's a really in-depth copy edit. To the other end, where it's almost a proofread because the writing is so tight, it's a light copy edit. And so there's a complete range of what needs to be done. And then after copy editing, you go to proofreading. Once you're in there, you're only looking for typos. You're not changing anything. It's just, is there an extra space? Is it capitalized the same? Did I spell something gray with an E and an A, or those things. And so it gets more and more detailed the farther you go in the process. There's substantive, developmental, structural. All of those terms are really looking at the big picture of the book. And there's also ranges. So if a writer has written their first draft and the story structure is strong, then you go down to the level you're doing scene by scene structural editing. If there's problems with the story arc, you fix that first before you bother fixing scenes, because you're going to move scenes, you're going to cut the scenes, tighten scenes, lengthen scenes, change. There's no point in working on a scene edit if you don't have your story. So it's in a sense that you can kind of do the same thing with story editing, is there's a range depending on the quality of the story at the time.
So am I right in saying that structural editing is looking at the framework of a story and not so much the word type level by level, like, oh, here's a typo? It's not even worried about that. We're worried about just the actual framework.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So we teach our editors not to copy edit when they're story editing for two reasons. One, a story that's expensive is typically, 3 to 4 cents US a word, right? So that's $2,400, $3,000. It's a lot of money. And the writer's paying you to answer the question, do they have a good story? They're not paying you to go, you should use the word fluff instead of, whatever, right? They're paying you to, do I have a good story? So when an editor starts copy editing, their brain is now focused on that and not on the story. So it's a disservice to the writer. And then on the writer side, it's very tempting for a writer to go, ooh, there's all these changes. I'll accept all my copy editing ones because those are easy to fix and I'm done. And they don't do the story editing because it is hard. And so we really push our editors hard. Do not copy edit. Tell the writer up front you're not copy editing. If they need a big copy edit, you must tell them that please do go use a copy editor. But if they don't, you can also tell them that too, you can go right to proofreading because you're writing so tight. So you can advise, but you can't actually do it.
Ah, got you. You're so well informed. I'm just curious, whatever got you into this business? Are you an author yourself? Are you an editor? Like, what drew you to this point of being head of Fictionary?
What drew me to it? I decided one year. So my husband and I had spent 4 years on a sailboat sailing. And the first time we went out, it was really, you have to learn the weather, you have to learn diesel mechanics, you have to learn how to use the GPS, you have to learn, and your whole brain is just focused on that. We did it a second time, and the second time we went out, all that stuff. And so I'm like, what shall I do? I'll write a novel. That's what I will do. Because, we're out on the boat, you got time, what are you doing? And then I realized, wow, this is really hard. And so I started, my background is computer mathematics, so I have a very techie background. And so I built this massive spreadsheet thing of, okay, here's all my scenes, and these are all the things I need to know, and I need to check an entry hook, and I need to this, and I need to check how many characters. And I was finding, I can't remember all that. It's too much. And so I put it all in a spreadsheet, and then I built my graphs. It's very, I don't know, geeky, but whatever. And so I did that, and then my husband sort of walked by one day and went, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm writing. He's like, in Excel? I'm like, yes, that's what I'm doing. Because I can't figure this out. I need a way to figure out this story, and I can't remember all of it, and I can't remember all the things I need to remember about a good story. And he went, oh, there's an app for that. I thought, great, find it for me. And then he came back and went, no. And then we started talking. He also has a computer science background, and we thought, we could build that. And so we did. Just kind of came from that.
Interesting. When was that?
So that would have been around 2013 when I was writing. And then around 15, I got a publisher, and I did really well on some big crime writing awards. And so at that point, then we thought, oh, and I actually figured out I really like editing better than writing. So I just switched to the editing thing, and we did our first beta was 2018, so it's been about 4 years now.
Wow, that's pretty well. You're going on 5 here at this point. I'd say.
I know.
That is really cool. I did not know this about you, and see, you and I have had talked previously that you are an accomplished author and such. So you had, for lack of better words, you had a selfish interest in having something like this, so it could actually help you, right?
I did it for me. The whole Excel thing was just for me. And then we got excited about, well, gee whiz, there must be other writers who are struggling with this. Like, it's really hard. It's very complex to write a novel. It's not an easy thing. And, because we're both technology oriented, it was just a really fun thing to do. And, it would have been very difficult after being out in a sailboat for that long to come back and work in corporate environment. So we were also motivated by, well, let's just start our own business because we can't, there's no way that we could go work in an office again.
I feel you. You almost get to that point when you have that sense of freedom that you feel you're almost unemployable, where it's just like, if I go back into that environment, I'm not going to be very nice to work with.
No. So that's kind of where it came from.
This, you mentioned really briefly, and I feel like you buried the lead on this one here. Did you say that you got a publishing deal?
I did. Imagine Books. I've had 4 books published. My Stone Mountain series. So, and it's funny because I focus on editing and Fictionary, so I don't think about it much anymore. But I wrote Descent, Blaze, and Avalanche, which are murder mysteries that take place in a ski resort, because we lived in a ski resort for 6 years, and At the time, I was head of human resources and security there, so I had every issue, and so I had a lot to say about that. So my first books came from that, and then my fourth book, Look the Other Way, came from being on the sailboat, and it's a murder mystery that takes place in the Bahamas, and that one I've actually pulled. Because I'm using it in teaching in the Fictionary community, and I needed the book, so I took it down. So it's kind of fun.
Interesting. That's really, really cool. Okay, what is one thing about Fictionary that you're most proud of?
The story arc. I love the story arc. It took me a year to figure out the mathematical formula to go behind that to draw it. It was the hardest thing to do. And I think it's the eye-popping moment for a writer when you can see, do I have a story? Like, it actually answers that question for you. It's really just, it just does when you look at it, and we have the help tips within Fictionary to go, okay, what does an inciting incident have to do? So you can look at that and go, does my inciting incident do that? Yes or no? No. I got to revise this, right? Now I'm on to my plot point 1, right? Down to the climax. Does it mirror my inciting incident? No. Well, maybe it should fix that. And so, and is it answering my story question? Which a lot of writers, somehow new writers can get to a climax and write a great climax scene, but not related to the story blurb. Does it do that? Yes or no? And so by the time you get through it and you see your story arc, which redraws every time you edit. So if you cut a scene, it'll redraw. If you add text, it redraws. Move scenes, it redraws. And so you can always see, is your story, as you edit and revise, getting closer and closer to the shape you want for your story. And so it took me a long time. That was really hard to do that, but totally satisfying.
Sounds really, really cool. You guys are headed in the right direction. If I'm an author and I'm thinking about looking into Fictionary, how do I know if it's a good fit for me?
Oh, just come into the community. That's the way, because you'll see what others are doing. You'll see how people are using it. We have lots of sessions on. Today we're going to figure out how to write a synopsis in the app. This is how you do that. And we show it. And so people can see it live. We have a 14-day free trial, no credit card required. So import your manuscript and give it a go. Also good. We kind of have two kinds of writers, some who are a little technology hesitant. And so once they come in the community and they get to know people, and then they get to see the app in action and how it works and what it's doing, they're happy with it. And others who are super techy, they come in on the 14-day trial and go, yeah, okay, I get this. So, it's that you can tell I like ranges. It's that range of from this side to this side that, and of course we love it when people come and do a 14-day free trial, because it gives them a chance to see if it's for them. And some people it's not, and that's okay. Some people it is. Some people come back a year later and go, okay, I'm ready now. Great, thank you.
How large does my manuscript need to be? Do I need to, say, have 10,000 words, 20,000 words, or is there some type of a limit?
Yeah, so the trick with the story arc, you can do any word count for anything except the story arc, because the story arc needs a story. And it starts to draw somewhere around 15,000 words, depending on how many scenes are in the book, where they're placed, the length of the scenes, all of these things. But it's not really accurate until you have your story written. So we do have people who write from scratch, and then the story arc just grows. And then when they're at the point where they feel they have the story, they use the story arc. But everything else, like word count per scene, scenes per chapter, characters per scene, all of that, it can work on any length. Our thing is we're really about fiction, and we're about commercial fiction.
Okay, good. Any chance that there's going to be a non-fictionary by chance?
Well, I actually wrote my last book, Secrets to Editing Success in Fictionary. It came out in February, and it is basically, it's an in-depth look of how to edit your story. And I wanted to test out how would I do a nonfiction, because there's such a trend now that with nonfiction, it's narrative nonfiction, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote it with another woman, Lucy Cook, and the two of us thought, all right, well, what's our inciting incident in this book? What's our blurb? What's our story goal? What do we want? And then where's the middle? Where's it? So we actually wrote it around it. And so we're playing with it. I'm in the middle of writing another nonfiction called Secrets to Outlining, and same thing. We're doing it in Fictionary, and we're outlining it in Fictionary to prove our outlining process works within Fictionary.
Wow, you've just blown my mind here right now, and I have a feeling I'm just going to have to start dipping into Fictionary for sure.
Yes,
As we start to wrap things up here, I always love to ask my guests this question: what advice would you give to aspiring authors and self-publishers out there?
What advice would I give? I think it's write what you love. I know there's a thing about write what you know, but you can research what you don't know. If you love what you're writing about, if that's your passion, you can stick with it. It takes a long time, and particularly first book takes a long time. And so for me, I wrote about murder in a ski resort. Not that I love murder, but I love reading murder mysteries. That's my thing. No, I just want to put that out there. That's what I read. And I'm an avid skier. And so I know a lot about skiing, of course, because of that. But I love skiing. I love being in the mountains. I love that whole thing. And so to spend a lot of time with my book, I wrote about something I loved. And I think that helps people not get burnt out because you have a passion for whatever topic you choose to write.